Welcome back to the Lords of Lore podcast. I'm Matt,
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
and this is
I got
Jack.
Jack here. Nice to meet you guys. What's going on?
What's going on? Welcome
Hey,
to the
man.
show. We're happy to have you as our first guest ever on the Lords of Lore main show.
Oh, super
Milestone
pumped,
here.
Oh.
Today we're going to be going through our series on character classes from D&D, not specifically how to play D&D or how to use these classes in D&D, but some inspiration if you're making one of those characters or you just want to learn more about that type of class. And today, going alphabetically, we're combining two divine casting classes in Clerics and Paladins. And obviously we've brought Jack on because Jack told me he likes to play Paladins and stuff. So we'll dive into that, but not before we get into our regular scheduled programming in Luca's Litany of Literature, wherein Luca tells us about some fantasy goings on of the week. And then we'll get into Matt's Monster Musings, where I bring a monster. And then we'll start off the main topic with Will's Wondrous Wisdom. Weenie Will's Wondrous Wisdom, as it's now called. So yeah, let's jump into it. Go ahead, Luca.
So I am still obviously reading Malazan Book 7. Molasses, yes. I'm getting towards the end of it. And, I wanted to talk about Grimdark as a genre. I mean, subgenre. Because I realized now that I've read so many just brutally depressing scenes in Malazan, but like it's so well done that like it's held me. But usually I don't enjoy reading, sexual assaults and murders and all this kind of stuff in abundance. So I just wanted to gauge how do you guys feel about, I guess, Grimdark as a subgenre, like especially since Game of Thrones like sort of reignited this realistic Grimdark sort of grounded in reality fantasy sci-fi.
Jack, we see in your background for audio listeners, what do they call it? Space Marines.
Space Marine, buddy. So Grimdark is my favorite reads, if anything.
Wow.
I guess like a little quick history on it. Like prior to, I'd say like high school and stuff, I'd only kind of read books to facilitate school. Wasn't really into it. Wasn't until maybe like 2 years ago, or maybe 2.5 years ago, I started really picking up, and like I totally sunk into like Grimdark, and Warhammer was kind of like my pick because that's just like the most aggressive views of like all kind of characters or races and stuff like that. So like Game of Thrones as well, I jumped in, and I really like the realistic approach to reading, because I think like I have a hard time reading something that's like, I'm not trying to talk badly about other people's like kind of literature and how they like to read, but something that's like close to reality and like history and like what people have done, I really like that stuff. That really kind of,
I think Warhammer coined the term too, right? And the first 40k was like in the grim dark future of blah blah blah.
There's only war, baby. It's only war. It's only war, my man. That's all that happens. Every race is terrible to each other, and they're people. Like humans are horrible religious fanatics. There's like kind of orc.
In the works. Okay.
Oh yeah, they're terrible people. They the church is not church is church, but they're not very good. The Imperium is a terrible place to live if you're a human and you're just like not a space marine. You're pretty much just like the bottom of the barrel. You're working 14-hour days in some industry that only pumps out stats, and that's the only thing they're doing for the economy. So it's like, wow. I love that kind of stuff. So
what about you, Will?
I love 40k as well. I haven't like
nerds. We got them.
Probably like some cow.
No, I'm definitely a hard Dark Angels fan, but
buddy.
Kill birds. Go. I don't know. I love the Imperium, but yeah, it is a pretty shitty place. Like, the one thing about like 40k is like the scale of it is so big. So like, yeah, like what like Jack was saying, like the most common person has just pretty much been like bred to work in a factory that like produces like a single thing. and like, yeah,
like craft worlds. That's all they do is they just produce like ore, and that's it, and that's your job. You get selected, you get credits, and you just duck your head from the Inquisition if they sniff heresy from you.
Slam.
Heresy. Grimdark as a whole, I think like every I mean, we're all pretty young here, but I think like historically every like, I don't know, 15 to 20 years or 10 to 15 years, there's a property that comes along and it like revitalizes Grimdark. And then the next few years, it's like everything's fucking dark. Like we get like a Pac-Man movie and it's like Grimdark. But I think like even like comic book movies, it's like The Dark Knight. It's like a grimdark take on it, which was different from the movies of that time. And a contrast to like the Marvel movies, which are sort of light and campy. They're based in reality, like if you could call it that, but you know, they're sort of they're like brighter films than I think like the Dark Knight trilogy and DC movies in general now. I think people see Grimdark as a genre, and I don't think it should be. I think Grimdark should be like a lens in which you can see a genre through. Like obviously like Grimdark fantasy, like we're talking about, but I don't know. I don't like Grimdark for the sake of Grimdark. I think like if it enhances the story, that's much better. But I don't know.
No, I agree with that point. Actually, that's a really good point because then like it becomes like so fixated on like violence and like almost like gore porn in a sense. You're just like you're just like over just kind of like describing the kind of action someone's taking, and it's like going into great detail, and you're like, okay, well, I get it. Just hands chopped off. You don't have to.
It's like it's sort of like that torture porn sort of thing, but also just like, what if the Power Rangers were in a grimdark world? It's like, no, I don't want to imagine that. Like, what about you, Luca? Overall, what are your thoughts on Grimdark?
I mean, like my exposure to Grimdark has been like essentially Game of Thrones was the first, and then I started reading the First Law trilogy, which is essentially like the one that like the next great grimdark fantasy story written by Joe Abercrombie, and it's like really really well done. But I feel like since they were talking about 40K, like 40K is one of the most like relentlessly hopeless worlds or like universes I've ever like learned about. But I feel like sci-fi, especially like super advanced sci-fi, really like lends itself better to grimdark than like fantasy, because fantasy for decades has just been like the Western European influenced like normal story, like boy from a farm becomes the chosen one, whatever. Like only like with A Song of Ice and Fire did really grimdark fantasy get like mainstream popular, and then every publisher wanted like the dark stories, and then you got a lot of really mediocre like attempts at it, which I don't like how you guys were saying essentially turns into like torture porn, just for the sake of violence without any like point. Whereas if the violence is grounded in like the psyche of a twisted character, then it like makes way more sense, even though it's still like uncomfortable to read, which definitely is what Malazan is. Like it's like very well justified brutality and violence from the perspective of the world and the characters, which is why it took me like 7 books, I guess, to be like, wait, this is pretty depressing, actually. Like, this is not a happy story.
That's a really good point, though. Like, the character's perspective of it should be the way that the world is themed, kind of thing. Like, because even Batman Begins, it's not that dark. Compared to the other 2 films, it's a little bit lighter. But then it goes grim dark when you get to The Dark Knight, and that's because we're dealing with the Joker. Even like I talked about Senua's Sacrifice when we did the episode on barbarians, but that's a super grim and dark world, and that's because you're playing as a character who's going through like psychosis and all this stuff. So yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, so that will I just wanted to have a little convo about the story that I realized was like super dark, actually.
Yeah,
kind of going off the grim dark as well, I'm kind of coining it. I find it funny. It's kind of like Dark Souls, where like Dark Souls has like an idea of, you go to like checkpoints and you like can't get to a checkpoint, you lose it. And then like every game and is like, it's a Dark Souls remake. And it's the same thing with like Grimdark, where everyone will be like, oh, it's kind of like Game of Thrones, but it's kind of not. And it's kind of like, you're just like, okay, well, like, what is it then? Like, I think you made a really good point, Matt, is like, it's definitely not a good genre type. it's definitely better to like look through the lens, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I find it really annoying when someone kind of like characterize it as like, this is kind of like what you like to read in
Dude,
Grimdark.
sort of like it's like the Dark Souls of like Zelda.
But it's not Dark Souls, man. It's not. They got the weapon, but it's not Dark Souls, man. You wouldn't like it.
But saying that, Luca, the book we did the review of a couple weeks ago, that was like your pitch to me. It was like, yeah, imagine like Game of Thrones, but like African culture, and I was like, sick.
Jeez, man,
okay,
wild.
If that wraps up the litany, let's move in.
I mean, it doesn't wrap up.
No,
the
of
litany.
course
it adds
not.
another entry to the litany.
Of course not.
Skims along.
So yeah, let's talk about Matt's monster of the week, and I'll start with a riddle. I'll ask this riddle to the three of you. What is it that has one voice yet becomes 4-footed and 2-footed and 3-footed? So it looks like no one's heard this riddle before, which is good. Luca, we'll go to you. Any answer?
Oh.
No, Will, what do you got?
Oh, wait, never mind.
Okay.
It's the
Jack?
last part that threw me off. Sorry.
It is.
1 foot.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
4-footed, then goes to 3-footed, then to 2-footed. Oh man, I can
4-footed to 2-footed to 3-footed.
Oh man, this is not my cup of tea. I can't even think of like it's such a. I bet you when you tell us, you'd be like, oh,
yeah. Okay, so the answer
is this the Sphinx riddle?
It is.
Okay, then I know.
Oh my God.
Because we're talking about sphinxes today and Matt's monster music.
It was the 1 foot that threw me off.
Did I say no? I didn't say one.
You said one voice. You said one voice, and then
one voice. Yeah.
4-footed, 2-footed, 3-footed. So yes, I know the answer.
So yeah, the answer is man. And that you have one voice. You begin crawling to start your life, then you walk 2-footed, and then when you become old, you need a staff or a walking stick to walk 3-footed.
See, I thought you said like 1-footed, so I was like a pirate. Like
Yeah.
a peg
That would have
leg.
been the
A
best
baby
answer
pirate.
That would have been the best answer ever. That would have been hilarious. The peg leg.
So you guys sound familiar with the Sphinx. And so, okay, I'll be honest. I didn't want to do it specifically on the Sphinx today. And Luca, this will make sense to you really quick. I actually wanted to do it on a creature called the Kipine or the Kipine, which is like a combination between an owl and a dragon. Think of Wei Wan Shitong from Avatar.
Oh, nice.
It's like this. So here's the mini. I always show my mini here. This is the owl drake thing I painted. One of my favorite minis I painted. I'll actually put a picture of this in the video because I'm actually proud of this one.
Yeah, it's a really cool one.
And Luca, you would have seen this in the campaign of mine that you were in. And a little bit of spoiler area. I actually just reskinned a Sphinx to do that encounter. I don't think there's anything original I added to the Sphinx's monster sheet. And I do have a 3D printed Sphinx here, which I used for a cake topper for my sister-in-law's birthday. So the Sphinx doesn't look like an owl dragon thing. It actually looks like a lion's body with eagle wings and a human head. Traditionally, that human head is a female or a woman. And these sort of originated in Egypt and in Greek. So the Sphinx is like tasked with guarding holy areas or sacred areas or treasures or even like entrance. There's a story of like a Sphinx guarding the city of Thebes or Thebes. I don't know things. And so like you would have to answer that riddle or a different riddle, probably a better riddle, to get inside the city. It comes from the word, I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I don't know things, sphingine, which means to bind or squeeze, which came from lions, strangling or mauling their prey. And yeah, so in D&D, a Sphinx, there's two different types of Sphinx. There's a Gynosphinx and an Androsphinx. The one I used was the Androsphinx. But the Gynosphinx is portrayed with like a female head. It may have like regal countenance, so like it might have like there might be people who follow this thing, and it's often adorned in such a way that you would be able to tell that. Cool things I've heard people use sphinxes as like there's like a city way far out, and they don't have like a system of law. They just anybody who commits a crime goes to see the Sphinx, and the Sphinx decides if you get to live or die, and that's just their whole system of law. It's a pretty cool idea. So a giant sphinx's eyes, I should say, see beyond the present time and place. They penetrate veils of invisibility and magic. Supplicants who look deep into the eyes might find themselves magically displaced, banished to some far-flung plane where a difficult trial awaits them. So again, in D&D, a Sphinx often guards the treasure, which obviously the player characters want, or it might guard entrance into a sacred realm or to a historical city that you need to find something in. I don't know, get creative. But it'll often challenge you with completing a task. So like the riddle, in those sort of ancient stories from Greece and Egypt of a Sphinx asking to solve the riddle, if you didn't, they would like eat you. They're pretty brutal most of the time. And there was the story of what's his name? Well, you know these things. Oedipus.
Yeah.
Oedipus. Thank you.
Yeah.
He was the first one to get the riddle right, and the result of that was the Sphinx killing herself. I guess that's the catch.
And there's more to it. The story is like super weird. That's where the Oedipus complex comes from.
Sort of. So there's two versions of it. There's one version where she just kills herself and he goes on to do his thing. There's another version where he beds the Sphinx, and then she kills herself. Super weird. And then there's an extension to the second one where after he does that, then he goes to the city and marries the queen, which is his mom. Let's not get into that.
After killing his dad.
Yeah, so they test people to get to those treasures, specifically in D&D. Now, Androsphinx is what I really want to talk about. Androsphinxes are incredible because you sort of, as a DM, get to break the rules even further than you normally would because they have a lair. And when a creature has a lair in D&D, they can control the area around them. And this one is just unbelievable. So, Luca, if you remember, there was like this light sort of thing. You guys had to like line up the sunlight through a staff, very Indiana Jones, to get into its lair. And as you went in, you saw like stones that were falling from the top of the cave were like frozen in time as they fell. So that was your first clue. I can't remember what Oliver came up with, but it was wrong. But anyways, so it can stop time, this Sphinx. It can age a creature in its lair 20 years forward or back. So I kept trying to get you specifically with this, Luca, because you were the spellcaster. And it can also cast arcane spells. So up to like 5th level, I think. It just knows spells up to 5th level. So it would recognize you were an arcane caster because they are intelligent. And so I think your character was like 22. So I was trying to age you down to 20 years. You turned into like a small toddler and then just be like, you know, all in like your big wizard clothes and stuff would have been super funny. It can make something in its lair age 10 years. So like, I think I threw one of you into a tree and then made the tree age 10 years. And then it like caught you in the tree type of thing. And it can do that every rotation in combat. It gets to do one of these things. It can shift itself and 7 other people to a different plane of existence. So you might be having a conversation with one of these things, and then all of a sudden you're in hell, or you're in like the ethereal plane, or like in the heavens, or like whatever the case may be, in the astral plane. So you just might end up in space, and then it just dips out as a bonus action. So unless you have some, and it's not a spell, this is an ability, so you can't counter spell it or anything. So you might just get warped. Yeah, that's basically all I have on the Androsphinx. Super cool. Obviously show up in a lot of like Egyptian, like these are all over like Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. Yeah, thoughts on the Androsphinx? We'll start with you, Jack.
Oh man, it sounds like probably one of the spookiest things to fight like any type of combat. It's crazy. It's like first time I ever kind of heard it, so I'm just kind of processing everything you can do with it. But that, yeah, it was like, I mean, kind of going off like other podcasts, it's really interesting. All of these like creatures, and like how would you like even begin to like fight that then? If you can, is it like like for the special roll on that? Is that just like the one turn they can just send your ass somewhere else? Like,
Yeah, I think there's a save involved, so I think it's like a wisdom save. But if you save and 6 of your buddies don't, then you're
just
stuck
like
there.
stuck in place.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, all my boys are gone now.
Exactly.
I'm just fighting
Yeah.
this massive thing. Oh man, like no, that's something I would never ever want to fight ever in a game.
The good thing is that they are like lawful good. And they're specifically not like deceitful, or like they won't try to trick you. And Androsphinx will often start a conversation by insulting you just for shits and gigs, because I don't know, it's just what they do. But
your puny life form, yeah, compared to
yeah. And yeah, some people think they're omniscient. Even like in real world history, there's proverbs that are attributed to sphinxes, which is, I don't know, pretty big deal. But yeah, it'll start the conversation by insulting you, and then, but it is a good thing. And I guess it depends on your interpretation of good.
I think I'm thinking about in my head too, like, are they like more organic looking, or do they have kind of like they adapted to their surroundings? So like when I think of like a sphinx, I always think of like movies and nostalgia, just like sand, or like it's made out of a combination of like different things around it, or is it just like a combination of animals into one?
Yeah, so it's most commonly like especially in D&D, it's mostly like the lion body, eagle wings, and then the humanoid face. But the face can change to have like leonine features. It can just be like a lion's face with wings. And obviously like mine is a fucking owl with antlers and a peacock tail. So it can be whatever you want it to be. Mine took place in like a jungle, so it didn't make sense for me for there to be like a lion eagle thing. I don't know.
I kind of saw it too. It gives me a lot of like Witcher vibes too. Like when you showed me up your model there, I was like, the color texture. I was like, that's something that I feel like the Beasher would have in The Witcher. That's like such a cool design.
I'm flattered. Luca, Will, any thoughts on the Androsphinx?
Yeah, I mean, in D&D terms, just the worst. Like, I want no part of that as an enemy. Like, I'd rather.
That was a long fight, if I remember.
Yeah, and it ran away. Like, we didn't even kill it, right?
You guys killed it, and then it came to an agreement. It gave you, I think you guys got it to half.
Yeah.
And then it was like, you guys are worthy. You can have my
this guy
thing. Yeah,
we almost died in the match. Is like, oh, I guess you guys are worthy. Like
crawling out of the hole, like just nobody. Jeez, man.
Yeah, I want no part of that.
Well,
yeah. I like, I'm not familiar with like the D&D version, but I did actually like there's a Sphinx that you get to fight in Assassin's Creed Origin. No, Odyssey.
The Odyssey, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a puzzle fight and stuff like that. But I mean, the puzzle was like super easy, but like I like purposely like messed up because I wanted to see like what would happen and stuff, and you get like laser beamed instantly, and like that's it. But yeah, I always thought they were like kind of cool. I mean, I've never really seen them in stuff in like much media. I guess like Mummies Alive, like the old cartoon show, but that was
good reference. Good reference.
Yeah,
good
that's obscure.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I sort of like your idea, Jack, in that it just becomes what's around it, because it's like a being of like, I don't know, godly creation. So it's just like, yeah, I'll be sand if I want.
Like opens up a third eye and it shoots you into space. Like you're sitting there, you're describing this. I'm like, oh my god, no thanks. It was like the other creature you guys were talking about, the Medusa one. The other cup, I think it was like last week. They can like teleport like above you.
Yeah.
It's like almost like, well, like I guess like in the thing it's like a couple tons, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, the bomb snake.
Yeah, just slithering around the backfield, just coming at you at full speed. No. But yeah, that sounds like it's something that gives you some like spooky stuff, some spooky insight into the universe. You wouldn't even know. You like look into its eyes, and it would just melt your mind. So
I think that happened. Like someone tried to use detect thoughts on it, And I was like, all right, roll a intelligence save. And like for a turn, they were just like, ah.
Brain melts in your head.
Yeah, we can't comprehend what. And I think there was like information gleamed from it that was like, relevant to the campaign. But most of the other stuff was like, yeah, I don't even want sexual desires anymore. I'm like,
so you're like the beginning of the universe, and you're sitting there like,
yo, Will's acting kind of different, man. Ever since we fought that Sphinx.
He's kind of sus, bro. Will's kind of sus, bro.
Okay, but Jack got into it a little bit. What would you guys choose between fighting the Androsphinx or the Merilith? So lawful good versus like chaotic lawful evil, like just like insane demon thing versus this like godly trial tester guy. I'll start with you, Luca.
Yeah, I'll take the Sphinx.
Mm-hmm. That's just because you got it to half and it let up, or
no, just because the lawful good versus chaotic evil, pretty much like there's a chance to survive the Sphinx.
Your D&D characters sort of veer into like the neutral chaotic range. So do you feel like you might be, pressing your luck going up against the lawful good?
No.
Good answer. That was your test. What about you, Will?
Yeah, probably the Sphinx. I think like, I don't know, like the alternative is just like sucks. Like there's no other way out of it.
Well, you could simp for the barrel.
You could, but I mean, like, I feel like you could have like a better conversation with the Sphinx to like try and convince it like not to like hurt you. I don't know.
You heard it here first, ladies. Will is into conversations over physical 6-arm strangulation. So, and what about you, Jack?
Oh, just for alternative view, I'm gonna try to go for is it the Merilith? Is that the other one? Yeah. Because that when I think of like demon, I think of a way to like kill it. There's like relic or something. I mean, that's just in my head. When I think of God, tough sell to fight.
That's a good point.
Like, yeah, when I think of like that, there's like items that I could maybe grab that like could hurt it, or I could do some research. Hopefully, I got the time. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of an answer here, but
I think Meriliths do have like you can send a Merilith back to where it came, but you can't send an Androsphinx anywhere.
Once the Sphinx is like, okay, you know what, man, I don't like your banter. How's space? And you're like, oh shit, I can't breathe in space. Well, that kind of sucks.
That's a great point. I think that'll do it for Matt's Monster Musings. So now let's jump into the main topic here of Clerics and Paladins. Will, what do you got for us, you little weenie?
Weenie Will with the update. I mean, like Clerics, obviously. No, I shouldn't say obviously, but they're like historically based. I mean, cleric as in like real world history is like cleric of a church, usually like a priest. I mean, most often associated, I think it's only really associated with like Christianity, especially like Roman Catholic. But what I want to focus on is the Paladin, the ultimate Chad, if you will.
I got heels for the boys and a huge knife.
Christ for the boys.
We kneel for the boys.
It was actually funny.
All the homies love Christ.
I was like joking about it with Matt the other day on the phone, but like most often, like I in fact, like someone else even like called me out for it. Usually whenever I start like an RPG game, I always roll Paladin. And it's like most generic human character with sword. That's it. Healing spells, absolute tanking. But historically, I guess in hold on, sorry, I'm just bringing up my notes.
Yeah, big notes guy over here.
Yeah, notes are up. Let's go.
It's got scrolls.
I mean, like Paladin was like the term of Paladin was first coined in French literature. It was actually the oldest.
Paladin.
What?
Paladin.
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 Sorry to any French listeners we might have.
Paladin. Yeah. It was written in the a work called The Song of Roland, which is actually like
Yeah, you talked about this before.
on an unreleased episode or first episode.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it just like worked perfectly. But so in the Song of Roland, the focus is on the titular character Roland or Orlando, if you're Spanish. So back in the day, Papa Charlemagne was basically creating the boundaries of Europe. His nickname is the father of Europe. So
big Poppy Charlemagne. We know.
yeah. So like this is like post-Roman era.
Charlemagne Poppy. Holy fuck.
Poppy or Charlemagne. He's basically just off, kind of just establishing the boundaries of like the Caroline Empire, which is also known as the First Holy Roman Empire. I guess technically the only, but Charlemagne was also the first Holy Roman Emperor of Europe. So like the story, there's like different versions, obviously, because it's like 1,200 years old. In the story, Charlemagne and the boys are going through the Basque region of
Charlemagne and the boys,
which is kind of, it's like this mountainous region, and there's like basically just like French and Spain. It's like right on the border today, of today's borders. So the boys are like going through, and then Roland is kind of like this like younger lord / nobleman / knight, absolute Chad, total Chad stud. He's basically like, I'll take up the rear guard, watch over the boys while everyone else is like heading home. And then due to a betrayal,
just you in NHL.
Yeah, just me, just holding down the blue
just
line.
Absolute banter.
Stay at home, D-man. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like Roland gets like rolled on. By like depending on the version, it's either Saracens, but it most likely been like Basque soldiers. So basically they get like attacked from behind, and then everyone's like, Roland, like, yo, we need to call for help. This is like absolute madness. And he's like, no, I'm like too much of a Chad. We don't need help. So he just like basically holds everyone off, and like depending on like which version, again, kills like, I don't know, a couple 10,000 or something like that.
By himself?
No, like with his
Dolo.
With his like band of homies, but mostly by himself. And then
fuck Saracens. Me and all my homies hate Saracens.
Yeah, anyways, the story ends with him just like blowing his horn to finally let everyone know that they've been attacked. Because like Charlemagne and the boys have no idea this is going on in the background. Like they're just heading home. Then they hear the horns go. Then after Roland's put in a massive dent, he blows his horn as a warning. And then depending on the version, like his skull explodes. And then he just like gets immediately carried up to like heaven in front of everyone. He's apparently a Chad. Anyways,
what the fuck is this story? Like, I don't know, this guy just needlessly suffered for no reason, and everyone's like, he's a hero.
Yeah, I guess. I think that's like the lesson of like the
the
point of the story was kind of like to promote like self-sacrifice and selflessness amongst nobles and stuff.
Fucking hell up, being like, help! You could have called help 15 minutes ago. We would have pulled up.
Yeah, which is like kind of like in one of the versions, that's basically like what one of the other characters says. He's like, "Why are you doing this?" And he's like, "Well, just because." And then his head explodes.
Great reasoning. Great reasoning.
Yeah, absolute Chad moment.
I like the metaphor of his head exploding because he's too full of himself and won't call for help.
Yeah. Everyone else is probably like, "Man, what the fuck?"
Yo, this roller guy kind of sucks ass.
It doesn't change our situation. We're surrounded. But yeah, he was. That was like the term, like Paladin.
Sounds like a Monty Python sketch, man. Like everybody else be like, this guy fucking sucks.
You guys like take it seriously. It's like serious. These are Chad standards to live up to. Yeah, that's where the Paladin came from. And then, so like some sort of like holy absolute tank of a knight. Yeah.
I
guess.
Yeah,
Any
no,
comments?
I think, yeah, I mean, tons. Look, I'll make it very clear. Paladin is probably the least likely for me to play as a class. Cleric maybe not, because I usually like to play like the damage dealers or whatever. So if I got to play cleric once in a while, like whatever, I'm into that. I can roll a character, but I played a paladin once, and it was like a sorcerer mix, and I just don't feel drawn to paladins at all. So, and that story, like the origins of paladins, even less so now. Like, but Will, in our episode on bards, it came out last week. By the time people are hearing this, you said this is your favorite character class. So,
Yep.
After having told us that story, explain to us why, because I don't get it.
Well, I mean, like,
and then we'll jump
obviously-
to you, Jack, because I think you feel the same way, right?
Oh, I mean, we'll let him have the stand. I got some points.
I don't know, just absolute Chad. You wear the heaviest armor, which also means by default you're one of the strongest physically.
That's how that works.
I mean, you get the coolest weapons because if barring any long swords, at least you get some sort of like heavy mace. So you just like club people to death, really. If it's like a morning star, like the one that like swiggles around, even cooler. I mean, if you hit yourself, it doesn't matter. You have heavy armor.
It bounces off. No big deal.
I mean, you get to smite people. That's always cool.
That's sweet.
I mean, like, regardless of religious affiliation, I mean, smiting is just a cool thing. Yeah.
Oh, man. It could get any more surface level.
I mean, I played cleric.
Big armor,
guys
huge
at one
weapons.
time.
Big beat boy, beat baby.
God.
Better than
I thought you don't like big guys, dude. Like,
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah, but those are like, I mean, like a paladin, I would expect to be more like proportionate.
Wait, so you're fine with all the big boy tropes and personality, but just as soon as his shoulders are a bit too wide, it's like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shit. Okay, Jack, go ahead.
So when
redeem
I hear
Paladins.
Paladin, man, I think of like the Hulk Hogan of the church, man. I'm thinking like
Exactly.
an absolute unit. And the guy's walking around, he's got a big, just an absolute tank of a sword walking around casting spells, and that's a spooky combo. I mean, like, you got a cleric, he's just got a little spellcaster, little boo boo, a couple lightning here, a couple lightning there, a little frost there, but there's nothing crazier than a guy that you can shoot 5,000 times with arrows and he's still coming at you, and he throws down healing for the boys. So I really like that kind of paladin class. Like, I mean, maybe not so much talking about like D&D, but like I play like Dark Souls like so much. So when I like I always rocked a very hybrid class where I'd have like obviously like high strength, but like high I can't remember the
Straight miracles.
Yeah, it's just miracles, man. It's a spooky class, man. You're walking around, you're like, oh, here's this guy with like just hanky armor, and he's take absolute shots from you, but he's just constantly healing himself, and you're just like, oh, like, how do I deal with this? I mean, you just run away at that point.
They're clerics that can't read. That's what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're saying like the enemies in Dark Souls are more like paladins, or you?
Oh, sorry, my build in particular.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. But yeah, like I just like the class. It's very, I guess it's kind of like a hybrid of two things, right? You don't have to specifically dawn in which corner you want to be. It just gives you the ability to be more creative with the class rather than kind of sticking. And I mean, again, I've also played as like a cleric as well, so it's not like everything distinct about them, but you're kind of like in that. It's like being a barbarian. You're kind of like in that spot. Like, this is what you do. This is what you're supposed to do. Whereas like paladin, you kind of have a little bit more versatile with your character, but I mean, they are the chads of the church, right?
I think like a barbarian and a paladin to me is just like a paladin is just a barbarian from the suburbs, like, from the big city.
So he's got his pinkies up, bro. He's got his pinkies up, man.
A paladin, not a
Paladin. There he is.
Yeah, just like he went to like the preppy school, like but they're like the same dudes. Luca, how do you feel?
I mean, between paladin and cleric, I'd honestly choose paladin. I've also never really been attracted to the religious magic casters. Like if I'm choosing a mage, it's going to be a wizard or sorcerer in like D&D terms for sure. But if I were to choose between cleric and paladin, definitely paladin. Just because clerics are just, I don't know, something about like clerics are paladins that aren't cool.
Yeah, they're weebs.
Because I think, I don't know, paladins, they don't have like, it's always sort of that like crusader looking Templar guy kind of thing, right? For me.
Screams alt-right.
Exactly. Fucking but for me, cleric has a little bit more diversity in that like you could be like a grave cleric or like a trickster domain cleric or knowledge domain cleric. There's like or like twilight cleric. There's a bunch of like options that you don't have to be like a
cleric.
Yeah, like you don't have to be like a cleric from like the city. You can just be like, you know, I grew up in this forest and I'm a grave cleric or whatever. I have a god, but like my god is the god of nature instead of like the god of bros. Like, you know, like.
Yeah, but why can't you be a paladin from those same gods also?
You absolutely can, but I just never see a paladin in that way, because then for me it becomes you're either a fighter or you're a archfey warlock or like I just wouldn't map that sort of character onto a paladin because I don't know. Maybe that's just my own biases coming through, but
hey man, you know, different strokes for different folks, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know. I like there's like a class of like Grey Knights that are called like Paladins, and they're just like the biggest chads. They have like this like Terminator armor, and they're just absolute units, and they're like the highest ranked dudes. And when you're talking about like the shield and like kind of like Morning Star look, and I just like pictured it in my head. I was like, the guys that could like fit through no doorway whatsoever. Like they're so loud walking around. They're just so immobile, but God, they can hit people. Oh.
Shit, I forgot what I was about to say. Well, I played cleric that one time. That was like with Matt and Luca.
What was your character's name again?
Dickus Bickus.
I like that.
Grunor.
I love how it takes 30 seconds to warm up to it.
Yeah, he was
in French.
He was known for not wearing clothes.
Native cleric wolf.
He was a sicko. So maybe that's one of my least favorite clerics, but let's get into some of our favorite. Yeah,
healing hands,
healing, but also scarring.
You're the only cleric the party never let him touch anybody. Like this guy.
Yeah. Let me cure your wounds. No, thanks. No, I'll bleed out. It's fine.
My fingers greased up, man. You can't even catch him. Just like that one family guy running around the rope.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Magic.
My fingers graze your tunic as I place my healing hands upon you.
Okay, let's get into some of our favorite let's start with clerics, then we'll go to paladins. We'll start with you, Luca.
Oh, okay. So I mean, I've been drawing all my examples from Malazan pretty much, but I actually have this. So I brought a character named Heboric Light Touch, and he, when you meet him, is a former high priest of the god of war. And he did something to be thrown out of the priesthood, and the punishment for being exiled from the priesthood is they take your hands, chop your hands off. And when his hands get chopped off, they go to his god, Fenner. So when we meet Heboric, he's covered in religious tattoos, lost his faith and his hands.
Yikes.
And he is he begins as a essentially relentlessly depressing character, who we follow through all of. Yeah, I don't know, man. He just complains a lot, man. so we followed through like all of book 2, and then his story continues unexpectedly. As he slowly, I don't want to like spoil these, but he slowly begins to want to rekindle his faith because something happens to his god. And interestingly, okay, so just a little overview of, in Malazan, there's lots of gods and ascendants, and each god can have essentially like a religion or a following. And within his followers or their followers, there's always a mortal sword, which is like the god's mortal warrior warrior in the mortal world. There is a destriant, which is sort of like the leader of the religion, and there is a shield anvil who serves a very interesting purpose.
All gods have these 3 roles.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
And Heberic was none of those roles for his god of war. Man, I hate that I can't do spoilies. He becomes one of those
position
roles.
Becomes open, and
Yes, not even becomes open. The gods don't really care. They just choose you in Malazan, like even against your will. They choose who is going to be their mortal sword and etc. And he does become the something of a god. It's like a major plot point.
Sure.
Like the details of his new role. But he's just like, he's my favorite cleric. Like the cleric with no faith is my favorite type of cleric. Especially as he slowly like explains why he lost it, and then like him like slowly rekindling that faith is just my favorite like setup for a cleric. Is always like the fallen cleric or the fallen paladin.
I was gonna say it's like the cleric version of the fallen paladin kind of thing.
Except he's not evil. Like a lot of time fallen paladins go to like the chaotic evil or like whatever spectrum, but he remains honestly maybe even like a neutral good. Or but yes,
he does all this without hands.
Yes.
Look, Ma.
But you know how, I don't know if you guys heard, like there's a lot of legends and mythology that says, like, for example, if you lose an eye, you gain a different type of sight through that eye. So he loses his hands but gains a different kind of hands. Touch.
Okay, we'll move over to you, Jack.
Well, one of my favorite characters, I guess, like cleric, would be from I would say Dark Souls. That's called, I don't know if you guys ever heard of like Big Hat Logan. He's like just like such a cool design of a guy, and like his kind of lore in like kind of soul, I guess like the Souls lore is he's like one of the guys that kind of founded the Dragon School, and that's like kind of just like one of the it's such a long process there for that one to explain, but essentially like kind of the scholar of like the Souls art. And yeah, he has like his name, Big Hat Logan, has this like massive hat that like drapes over your body, and it's like one of the coolest things to kind of throw on in kind of Dark Souls fashion. And it's just like someone I like always go in each game to like find that piece or like seek it out. Like I don't really have much else to add, because it's like clerics just like not something, because like I mean like what I pull for lore, like clerics have like such a different meaning. They're more like a paladin. Like for in Warhammer, they're like considered kind of like a warrior class priest that go around just banishing demons from the plane. So that's kind of when I was like looking for this, I had some trouble kind of thinking what I should put down to sound interesting. But yeah, Big Hat Logan, big boy, huge hat. What can I say?
He sort of looks like Cole from Dragon Age, if anyone's
absolutely. That's a great reference. Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, Will, your favorite cleric?
Just chaplains from 40K. That's what made me think of.
Yeah,
I want to say Grey Knights, but those are definitely paladin, like peak space paladin. But I Thoros from Game of Thrones.
Thoros of Mir.
Yeah.
In the show or the book?
Both, really.
Which character is this?
He is
red
he's the one
hair.
that brings back
Jon Snow.
Yeah. No,
No.
that was Melisandre. No. Beric Dondarrion, and then
Yeah.
later.
Oh, he rolls with him. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was
Oh.
gonna say Beric is like sort of like a paladin almost.
Yeah.
So
no.
like the cleric counterpart type of thing.
Yeah, and like it's kind of like his backstory. Like, I mean, up until like in the show, up until they go like beyond the wall, is more or less similar to the storyline in the books. But it's kind of like what Luke was saying, because he did kind of like lose his faith in like the Red God. Like he's like, I think in the show he just says like he just tried it out because like Beric was like his friend and he was like dying and he didn't know what else to do, kind of thing. Then it just like worked. He was like, oh shit, this actually worked.
Damn.
That's pretty much like how it happens in the books, I believe, in season, or like in the 4th book, I think. But yeah, well, that's all I got for clerics, really.
Okay. Oh fuck! I forgot. I also on the show. Okay. I have 3. I'll dive into one, but I was going to mention Katara. Less having to do with like the divine influence, but just like as a healer.
Right.
Just thought I'd mention it. And then the other 2 I'm actually going to mention are from D&D, because I think there aren't enough examples that don't fall underneath that, sort of like European Catholic Church sort of things. Anyways, the first one is a trickster domain cleric called Jester Lavore. So Critical Role spoilers. I think I've talked about spoilers on Critical Role before. There's a lot of episodes, so if you intend to watch it, check back in about 2 minutes. But anyways, she is the patron, or she's a worshiper of this god called the Traveler. And the Traveler is actually an archfey from the Feywild who was given access into the Prime Material after once being locked there forever. The party from the first campaign of Critical Role like released him as like a deal, and then in the second campaign he's one of the like patrons to like this new character, but you don't find that out until like way later on. And basically he's just been giving like random people power, whoever believe in him, but he's just like a dude. Basically he's not a god, so he's not like omniscient, and he can't, like when he talks to you he's like actually talking to you. And so like he just keeps getting more followers and he starts freaking out, like he's like scared, like he's like, and so basically like he invites all his followers to this island where like there's this creature. I'll do a Matt's Monster Musing on it, but it makes you forget things. And so he wanted to like wipe the memories of all the people who he, like worshipped him, because he was just getting too stressed. Like you have to like play that out. Eventually a real god comes and like tries to like put him in god prison for like being a fake god, and like it's a whole thing. It's really funny. But her worship or her service to this god is just like fucking shit up. Like she's not like she's spreading the word of the Traveler, but like she's just drawing dicks in public places, on statues, like, and just like, fucking with people, kicking chairs out from their legs. That's like how he gets his power, causing chaos. The other one is a cleric of a death domain, Caduceus Clay. So basically he's from like this grove, and his family's like responsible with burying people. So they own like this graveyard. Yeah, he just like tends to people, making sure like the balance between undead and dead is like, where it should be. And he makes tea out of the mushrooms that grow on those people's graves. So kind of weird. Really, really sweet character design and cool character. So let's move into Paladins. Go ahead, Luca.
Paladins. I mean, again, I'm sticking with Malazan just because of that setup. Like the Destrian Mortal Sword Shield Anvil is like my by far favorite religious setup I've ever read in any media, like hands down. And the reason I love it so much is because the very first Shield Anvil we meet is Itkovian Tenthalion. He is the Shield Anvil of Fenner, the god that Heberic was a high priest of. so the god of war. And Itkovian is one of the leaders of a mercenary company called the Grey Swords, and they're all sworn to the god of war. So they're not like the traditional mercenary company that's like, wild.
Gods of war, may your hammer be mighty.
I love that. Hot Rod.
Ancestors protect me.
May they protect you.
Awesome.
Go
ahead.
Man, finish, man. Let the man finish.
So Itkovian, he is okay. So without going into too many spoilers, the shield anvil has the responsibility of taking on the grief and pain of essentially their enemies or his own soldiers, and he can take on their grief and pain into himself and pass it on to his god, which is how he essentially, it's not very deeply explained, but I feel like the implication is that like they want like their enemies to essentially peacefully go to death, and he wants to maintain sort of like the mental fortitude of his soldiers. But I don't know if you guys remember when we talked about the worst possible fantasy events to live through.
Right.
He is present at those events with the Teniscari I was talking about.
Right.
And there is essentially, so what happens is
that's a lot of suffering.
So something happens to the god of war, Fenner. This happens early in like book 2. And essentially, for some reason, which I won't get into, the god of war is incapable of fulfilling the responsibilities of its position. So Itkovian is essentially left bereft of his god. So he has nobody to pass the grief and pain to.
That is one sad dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
holy fuck.
So to put aside the Teniscari, there is another group that I believe I talked about called the Talani Mass. And they are a group of people that essentially sacrificed their mortal lives to become undead warriors that could essentially turn into dust and travel through the wind and the ground as dust and reform. And they were like impervious to pain and they lost emotion, all this stuff. Yeah. There is an interaction between Itkovian and the remaining Talani Mass, who have been around for hundreds of thousands of years.
Oh.
And without getting, so this is the end of the book Memories of Ice.
Okay.
And minor spoiler, Itkovian, something happens to him. Something mortally.
Okay.
Essentially a mortal wound of the spirit. And essentially the scene between Itkovian and the Talani Mass, and then how they honor him once he's done what he's done for them, is like one of my favorite sequences of events that I've ever read in any fantasy. Like Itkovian immediately became one of my favorite characters of all time.
Damn.
Through his, it is, and it's true. Like,
were you bawling in the car?
Yes. I mean, maybe not bawling. I was crying as this happened. Just because he's such a good guy. He's so honorable. Like,
it's a nice day for rain.
Put up just.
So to anybody who has read Malazan, what happens after the siege of Coral is what I'm talking about. And the scene where Silver Fox attempts to
he's getting choked up.
subject her control over the Talani Mass, and Itkovian's response to that is just, he is the greatest paladin of all time.
Wow.
Oh.
So read Memories of Ice and
damn.
Oh,
that was passionate.
Witness Itkovian. That's all I have to say.
Jack, let's move over to you. Try to
after that, I sound so down. I'm gonna have to go with one of my favorite Primarchs in Warhammer is Magnus the Red, and so he unfamiliar with Primarchs, or kind of like the Emperor is like pretty much like a god figure in the human world, and he had a bunch of sons, they're all Primarchs, they're all like gene seeds. So it's like gene seeding, essentially taking his DNA, applying it to the human race, and they're like demigods. So one of the demigods that operates the Thousand Suns, and he's kind of like where I kind of classify him as a paladin. He is high psyker, probably one of the, not if the most powerful psychers, second or no, probably third to in the kind of the ranking system from like the Emperor down. But just a really cool backstory, because we're in, I guess, to do a quick little lore count, there's like the Horus Heresy is a huge story that plays in Warhammer Fantasy, and it's basically like a huge civil war, cuts the entire kind of chapters in half to fight for the Emperor or Horus, the War Master, and trying to kind of, I guess, take over the Empire and rule it for chaos. And there's a lot of like stuff that happens. I'm skimming over like pages. So if you know about this and you're listening to it and you're ripping on me, give me a break. But essentially, he kind of does the biggest sacrifice, and everyone after the Horus Heresy is done, he goes back to his home world or his planet that has all of his soldiers, and he warps everybody into the warp, which is kind of another plane of existence where, you know, demons come from, and anything like celestial like thrives and feeds. So he's to save his kind of chapter from being annihilated because of them being connected to the Horus Heresy. You know, he kind of made like the ultimate sacrifice. So it's really cool because more of their lore as well, he becomes like a demon prince. So he goes from like, you know, a crazy demigod to like this crazy demon. It's like, it's kind of like half, it's kind of got like an ogren body, and ogrens have like the body of a dragon, but when it gets to the head, it's like the torso and like this absolute unit of a character. They're like huge. They're like 5 stories tall, and if you're playing in fantasy and an ogren's just like running up and you're just some farmer with like a pitchfork, you're like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? This thing just slaps you with like just decimating your line. But he kind of has that very demon-esque dragon body with a massive torso, and he's just one of the coolest psychers because he just has so much spell cast. But again, he's so hard.
When he becomes a demon, has he switched sides?
Yeah, because so like once he like vanished into the warp to save his, there was like a problem with since they were using so much insight, not insight, it's Bloodborne, so much psyker energy. So like it's kind of like if you've ever watched like Full Metal Alchemist, where like this world uses the property to like make alchemy work, but like from like whatever energy from like, I guess like our world. So it's the same thing where a lot of his troops would have high, you know, psyker power. So like with psyker energy, you're using like chaos magic essentially. So there are chances, if you're not attuned to it, you can actually open up a rift, and then a bunch of space or like chaos space marines start feeling in demons, and then you pretty much have to annihilate the world because you don't know who's a heretic and who's not. Their gene seed manipulated them because it had like so much insight into the warp that their bodies would change. So all of their troops are actually made of dust. So they're kind of like robots, but not. And they also play like with a little bit of Egyptian theme. Like I have a character model. Hopefully it kind of pans out. They have very Egyptian tops. They're very yeah, exactly. But I've always liked him because where a lot of the other characters, a lot of that were like kind of head of the chapters, you know, you kind of made a choice to either stick with the Emperor or, you know, band with Horus in the rebellion. He kind of was put in a spot where he had to protect his troops. And anyone using chaos magic at that time was, you know, was a heretic. So until they can kind of figure out who's who. So he had to make that ultimate sacrifice to move away from his father to kind of go to chaos. And it worked out for him because he's an absolute unit now. So he can't be killed. So it's really cool features on him. So definitely, if you get a chance to go pull that model up, it's such an expensive. I wish I had it. It's like my last kind of thing before I cap this army off and I move on somewhere else. But it's like $160.
Oh shit!
Tough sell. Yeah. But it's like literally like where my nipples end in my head. It's like the biggest model I've ever seen. It's so big. But yeah, he's just a very unique character in a kind of world where it's always bad things happening. And like everything's like a lot of self-sacrifice, but in this particular thing, it wasn't kind of to save like a planet, it was to save his like brothers, people that are, you know, go through thousands of years of combat together, not just, you know, a normal human life. So that's kind of where I'd stand on him.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yo, Thousand Suns are pretty cool. They're
Thousand Suns, yeah, Thousand Suns are very interesting because, like, in the lore too, like when you get shot, how they heal themselves. Like, obviously, like a tech priest would be something that would come in and like help, you know, Space Marine kind of heal their wounds up, even though they're pretty much invincible. But they like bleed sand, so they use like magic and they cloak their armor to like bring back, so they can technically never die. And they can never, they don't have to like respawn them in. It's just easy, just like cast a spell and you can like rejuvenate your guys like super fast, kind of like the Necrons.
Nice.
yeah.
Will, let's move to you. Your favorite, we'll get to honorable mentions I think after we're all passed through, but yeah, go ahead. What's your favorite, Will?
Actually, like the Templar order from I guess both StarCraft and Dragon Age.
I was gonna say that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I like the Templars and StarCrafts because it's like one of my favorite units that I always play. But definitely, like in terms of like lore wise, I love the Templars in Dragon Age, like in all of the Dragon Age games and stuff. It's definitely like the later, I guess like skill spec that I usually take as well. Similar, just very boring whenever I play RPGs, apparently. But
You take Templars. Oh my god, this guy.
Yo,
Oh yeah, he
shield
does, brother. Hell yeah, he does.
shield
Well,
bash
because
is square
there's
forever.
Reaver and then there's the other one, right? The blue one.
Yeah.
What's the blue one? I think I took that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, no, I always take Templar. But I think like I like it because it's like especially like in Dragon Age Inquisition where it shows like the conflict, because it's like
Yeah.
they're kind of like the check, like this, I guess like the check and balance to like mages and stuff like that. Because I love how like volatile magic is in Dragon Age, especially like when humans use it. So like as opposed to like other, I guess like incarnations where with like Skyrim and stuff where it's just like you read a book and all of a sudden you learn a spell.
Right.
Whereas like yeah, almost like 40k where like in like Bloodborne, if like you have too much knowledge and you don't know how to like handle it, it'll just like tear open a portal and
In your mind. Oh,
like ruin everything.
Tear in the veil type of thing, and then demons come crawling out.
Yeah, so like it's kind of cool because you have like these like absolute like Chad Thundercock Knights that just like
Thundercock Knights.
I like to put on the record, I love his description of everything happening. It's
like they're just like, okay, like we have no idea what's coming through this, but we're just gonna beat it to death.
That's the new chapter of Space Marines.
It's like the 1990s version of like any high school football movie. It's dude just sitting there and they're all like, oh, we're just gonna absolutely slay these guys and we're gonna have maxims. Right, brothers?
Linebackers with swords,
huge bullets and speed goggles on, thickest arm you've ever seen, no helmet.
Like whatever comes out of that tear in the veil, we're just gonna tombstone the fuck out of it.
Make sure you got the wax for your fucking goatees, boys.
Yeah. For like 40k, actually, I love Dark Angels, but like the first time I ever tried like painting like a model of anything was actually a Grey Knights.
Grey Knights, they're such a cool, they have such much lore and they're fun to paint. But I had the same problem too when I was like first starting. My roommate Mike, we played rugby together here in Victoria, and he's been doing it since he was like 10, maybe 11. So he's like a huge fanatic of it. And I used to paint a little bit, and then I kind of like stopped doing it in like high school because like sports and whatnot. But then he got me into it when we moved in together. And like once you get your first two models done and you get the kind of vibe of what you're going for, it's super fun. I mean, like, Matt, you can fucking talk hours.
Yeah, I was this close to playing Warhammer. Like I had started painting models just to paint them. and I was talking to my buddy Kevin Pond, and I was like, dude, we either gonna
Shout
play
out to Kevin
Warhammer
Pond,
or we're gonna play
Yeah.
D&D, and he was like, man, I don't know about Warhammer. It's like, I'm playing D&D, and then the rest is basically history. But yeah, it's close.
Oh man, it's cool. Like after watching your videos on Instagram, Mike and I have really dived into making like we follow this like YouTube channel. I'll send it to you. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he builds these like he'll 3D print like models and take like his paints and you'll build like these like such unique like kind of like steampunk. He has like one where he takes like a cowboy carriage that he got on like Amazon for like $5, cut off the bottom and put like legs on it, climbing up a mountain that he made out of plaster and stuff like that.
Nice.
And it's just like it's just so cool to do stuff like that. And it's also good for like presents and stuff like that, just to give to people.
Yeah.
Or you can have in your house, just like, this is what I made. The last one I saw was this boat that he had, kind of like a Mississippi stylist, kind of carriage boat. And he had like a massive crocodile. And he had like just like I don't know what it's called, like the plaster, but it's for for water. You build like fake water with it.
Like resin?
Resin, thank you, not plaster. But yeah, he built like this really cool alligator and put like different layers to kind of give it the texture. And then I was like, I'm trying that. That sounds so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, hit me up if you need any advice on that.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I was actually sliding your DMs. Hey, got any tips?
Will, any other faves?
I think more so I like the class, just like across like all RPGs and like fantasy and stuff. Yeah, I can't really think of like any specific ones off the top of my head though at the moment. Mostly because like a lot of the ones I think of, like in terms of like D&D classes, would more than likely fall into like the fighter category. Or
yeah, see, and that's my thing too, is like you guys are talking about like dudes with big swords casting spells, and my mind goes to, okay, I'd make a fighter and then spec or multi-class into warlock, or I'm making what are they called, Eldritch Knight fighter, or something like that. Like my first instinct is never to go paladin, because like I don't know, I just like smiting school, but the only paladin I ever made was like a fallen paladin, and then I went into sorcerer. I guess my favorite though, like I like Cullen from Dragon Age as well, especially because in Inquisition you get that like, so the paladins, for anyone who doesn't know, in Dragon Age, they get their powers from like ingesting lyrium, right? Which is like this what would you like, it's like a drug, but it's like a
crystal too, right?
Crystal, yeah.
Substance.
Yeah, substance. And I think they like inject it into themselves, right? But it's like highly addictive. And so in Dragon Age Inquisition, he's trying to like detox, trying to quit it, and basically like he's having like a really tough time, and you have to like, you get to decide whether you like let him. There's like one cutscene I think where you like slap his like his little like smoker's box thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool though, and I don't want to offend any religious people, but I thought it was like a really cool play on that. In that, in Dragon Age, they don't get their powers from a god; they get their powers from like this drug. I think like sometimes religion can feel like this highly addicting thing because like all these social pressures and stuff like that. And then someone sort of like trying to reject that, having a tough time. We see that with like in real life with people being like excommunicated and whatever from like their churches too. Like, yeah, so I don't know. Like I thought that was like an interesting take on it. Honorable mentions, I guess we'll start with the Jedi. Were like one of the examples when I was doing research for this that I was like, they're not paladins, and then I was like, oh yeah, I guess they are. They're religious warriors that are like knights of the galaxy. Yeah. So obviously there's a bunch of examples of like cool Jedi, but a fallen paladin would be like Vader. Obviously falls pretty far. It comes back. He's still, but I think the cool thing is he still believes in his religion. You know what I'm saying? Like that never changes. He's never like, fuck the Force. He still fucks with the Force. It's just like, yeah, I don't like the church, basically. I don't fuck with the Jedi. So that's cool. And then from Raven Shadow, the book Blood Song, because this character's role sort of changes throughout that trilogy. Valen Alsorna. He's a brother of the Sixth Order of the Faith. The Faith is a really cool religion in that there are no gods. They'll even say things like a god is a lie. And so they just worship the spirits of their fallen family members and friends, or like just people of their religion. And so like they're basically just, they worship ghosts kind of thing. And it becomes like this point of contention between them and other people on the continent and the kingdom they live in. And that some people believe in God, some people believe in nothing, and they believe in no gods. It's like an interesting religion I'd never seen before. And he's sort of like a paladin for them. And he's supposed to keep the religion in check type of thing. So yeah, any other honorable mentions from you guys? We'll start with you, Luca.
I was gonna say Cassandra from Dragon Age Inquisition, because she doesn't use red lyrium. Like she is
well, so red lyrium is the
it.
corrupted type of lyrium.
Say the corrupted one, yeah.
But does she use regular lyrium?
No, she did like that thing where like she like basically like put her mind and body to the test or whatever, and then just like went beyond the need of lyrium. I forget what it's called.
To me, she's like the quintessential like classic paladin, you know, like lawful good, super anal and annoying. Like
I love Cassandra.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike her, but like she is like super straight edge. Like anytime you do anything, it's like she's like, oh, shouldn't have done that. Cassandra disapproves. Like,
yeah. What about you, Jack?
I would say this is like a kind of obscure one, but if everyone played Ghost of Tsushima at all, the online aspect of it, I chose the Ronin class for the just because like their kind of connection, I guess, in the Ghost of Tsushima lore. They're connected with like nature, and like that's what they worship, is like the bond between man and nature and like the balance. And kind of one of like the perks you can actually get is this like beast tamer. So like you'll like spawn a dog and it gives heals for the boys, and you have like defense on high. So it's like that was like one of my favorite kind of like kind of mentions. And the other one was going to be the a Bloodborne, the Ludwig's Holy Knights. So like the church brand, they're usually rocking like big ass swords, and they that was like always something every time I played through, I always have like something through like kind of their fashion design as the Ludwigs. I always thought that was a really cool character to have, and kind of a branch different. But I guess like another question I had with like paladins and stuff, like does it have to always be like connected to like good? Like could you be like a bad paladin? Like was that classified as like a fallen paladin? Like is it always
I think for me, you guys feel free to jump in. I think it's always connected to religion. And I think most paladins would believe that their religion is good, whether it is or not to anybody else involved in that world. I think is like an interesting thing to play at.
Yeah, because I was thinking in my head, because I was thinking when you were like talking, like, because like, when you like look up paladin, it's like, you know, holy knight, you know, crusading church, but like what's your, you know, interpretation of religion can be different, you know, could be good, could be bad, and how you view it versus like if you're my enemy or a friend or an ally to the church or whatever, right? So like I always kind of
like, to non-Christians, crusaders are not lawful good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're like, you know, like Christian, you know, when you're a Christian, you're crusade, you're like, oh, you know, I guess they're moving the church along around the country, but like just like someone who's, you know, Buddhist or like, you know, like part of like Islam, you're like, ooh, crusader. So
these guys kind of suck.
Kind of suck.
You hear about that one guy who thought he could fight 10,000 men?
Paladin?
Who didn't like Jerusalem. But like, yeah, I mean, I kind of always like the idea of good versus evil, but in the sense of it's like convoluted. I don't like to be like, when you're talking about Vader as a good example, is like kind of continuing on this, it's like his view of the Force is different from like the Jedi. Like what's the correct? I mean, even though like obviously you can say the dark side versus the Jedi, but you know, like to the dark side or to the Sith, like that's the status quo, like that's what you follow rather than the Jedi's path. And
to someone who's not a Sith or a Jedi or doesn't even have the Force, they don't care. They're like,
No.
man, what the fuck is the Force, and why are you people killing people? Like,
don't
fuck
cut
off.
me in half now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always liked that kind of good versus evil, but there's a gray area in between where it's up to your kind of interpretation of what you think is good and what you think is bad.
As a DM, that like I would fuck with people like that. Like you'd be like a paladin of like, and you're raised in like the church and like taught like, oh, worship this god, and then like mid campaign I'd flip it and be like, oh, that god is actually this fucking evil being that like you're in service to him because humans fucking needed his help a millennia ago, and now you're like sworn to do his fucked up bidding. So all these people you've been killing in like your crusade to you serve your god, like yeah, they were innocent.
Oopsie,
so now what do you do?
My bad. Oh.
Yeah. But there's also like we see like paladins. Joe Manganiello, D&D guy. He's a paladin of Tiamat, who's like the evil dragon queen god thing. So I mean, you can be an evil, lawful evil paladin. I think as long as you're like religion's awesome. It's like yeah. Yeah, any thoughts from you guys as paladins in general, playing them in role-playing games, honorable mentions?
Like the Grail Knights from like King Arthur stuff. King Arthurian myth, legend, not stuff. Yeah, I would definitely say like, yeah, and like any Grail Knights really, because like there are like only like some that go for the Grail, but usually the most bold and Chad like.
Yeah. We're back on the Chads.
Yeah. Only the Brads stay home, not the Chads.
I think you guys all said like you would much rather play paladins than clerics. But Luca, I guess as a DM, how do you set up your world for a cleric to play in or a paladin to play in? Like, is there any things you set out to do? I think Sheesh was a paladin at one point.
Yep, he went into paladin. That was actually really fun because he was sworn to an orc god who was
cool.
Who was just straight chaotic evil.
Bisexual orc king prince.
My goodness.
So it was a lot of fun to like play that god. That was like I just let my ego run wild. So that was fun. But like writing for a lawful good cleric, like honestly, I'd probably pull something like that. Just be like, oh yeah, by the way, what you believed was like all like black and white. Now everything's gray. Now deal with it. Like I would want to do that. I mean, but unless you have like a character, like a player that's like, I want to play a fallen paladin. Like unless if you're talking about like surprising somebody who's like, yeah, I'm here to play a lawful good paladin. Like, yeah, no, not in my way.
Man, I feel like anytime like we do like this breakdown like towards the end of the show and like what I would do as a DM, I'm just realizing like I'm kind of cruel. Every time I'm like, huh, you came to play a specific thing, huh? Not today, motherfucker.
Let me flip your world in about 3 seconds here.
You want to play a bard? What if your family was murdered?
The Batman of Bard.
Yeah,
I was a jester, and now I'm a revenge.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, guys, on why paladins are important to fantasy or sci-fi? I guess even too.
I mean, important because religion is important to humans. It's pretty much wherever there's religion, there's people enforcing that religion. AKA
enforcing. I like the choice of words. Yeah. Jack, Will.
I'll let Will go.
They're good for.
I can't think of it. Last comment.
The
Awesome.
role playing is alt right, like the kill, burn, purge.
Yeah, make a faction.
God is actually wrong. So
the Albertan cock knights.
I'm not wrong. Change my mind.
My God gave me the largest cock.
In the best mold.
Well, yeah, I think on that note, that'll wrap up our conversation on paladins and clerics. Jack, thanks for coming on the show.
Man, I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for taking the time to include me. This was like such a fun way to end my Monday evening. So much appreciated for letting me on the show.
Yeah, man, come back whenever you want.
Oh man, absolutely. Love to.
And if people want to talk to you about paladins and clerics and 40K, obviously, where can they find you?
No, we're here for it. I got the lore already.
Nice. You got like an Instagram or something?
Oh yeah, Spooner_55. If you want to look up my Instagram.
Send out the Chad vibes to Jack,
Send
everybody.
some mullets. I want to see all of the followers with some mullets and some nice handlebars. It doesn't matter, if you're a girl or boy, they down. All I want to see is mullets and a nice little Fu Manchu coming down.
Oh, I love it. Well, yeah. So as always, I'm Matt.
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
And we are the Lords of the Lord. Good stuff.